Hi there, it's Louise with you today on behalf of Colour Blast. Now, today's layout is getting to play with some of the fabulous colour shimmer dusts and some resist techniques. Now, this layout is much more mixed media than what I would normally do, but with my position with Colour Blast, I am trying to include more mixed media in my work. So, to start with, I've chosen a photo and some papers, and I know I'm going to use those colour shimmer dusts. So I've just messily rubbed some black heavy gesso around the photo just to sort of give it a bit of a border. And it's really one of my favourite ways to highlight the photo if you know that your page is going to be quite busy. So you can do it with acrylic paint, you can do it with gessos, white or black. You can pretty much do it with any medium to, blur those edges of the photo and give a nice frame. Now, as you can see to the right hand side, I've already got my paint palette which has my dried up shimmer dusts already in there and all labelled. Now, the first one that I'm applying here is the Velvet, and it's on the 6x6 paper pad from Prima, and you can see as I start to spread that colour around that we're getting that resist technique. So the colour is going to soak into the paper and resist that element that's already there. Now, I dried these in between but did spray them, so I wanted some of the colour to settle, but I wanted some of it to blend as I start to add this navy. Now, you can see that I've used a second brush there as well. That's purely just because if I decide to go back in and use more of the Velvet, I can do that. Once that's all dried, I'm going to do a couple more techniques on these resist papers. Now, I found that the black resist didn't quite lift that colour as well as the white. So you can see that I've painted it just in the solid velvet colour, and I'm just going to dab some of that colour away because we sort of lost quite a bit of that black pattern. Now finally, and this is my favourite one, I've sprayed very liberal amounts of water onto that card and then just painted a stripe of the shimmer dust at the top, sprayed more water and let it run down the page. Same process with the Velvet, sort of leaning with this one more towards that navy because the first resist that I did was a lot more in the velvet area. Now, I'm using a heat gun to dry mine, and you can see when they're dry just how interesting the papers work with that resist technique. So you could also do this same process with some stamping and embossing. So if you have some Snow White embossing powder, you could certainly do this on any paper. I would probably use a watercolor type paper just to help that color soak in and resist that actual shimmer dust as you pop it onto the page. Now I'm starting to build layers into the background, and when I'm happy with the layers off camera, I'm going to go ahead and stick those down, and I've used some card in between the layers as well just to help lift some areas that are hopefully going to raise up off the page a little bit. Now, I decided that my background was going to need to be a little bit mixed media as well, so I applied some clear gesso because I wanted that paper to really be, part of the layout. I didn't want it to blend into the background, so that's why I used clear instead of white. And because I was using the clear, I obviously had some of the navy shimmer dust still either on my desk or on my hands, because when I was spreading the clear gesso, I ended up with navy shimmer dust in my gesso. So that spread around the page, and I had to come up with a way to cover that up. So the splatters a lot in this background are sort of mostly to blend that navy that ended up in the background that probably wasn't supposed to be there. But again, these are all things that part of the mixed media process you learn as you go along. So be aware that those shimmer dusts, a little goes a very long way. You do not need a lot, and if you've got it on your hands or on your clothes or on your desk or pretty much any kind of tool or equipment, you're going to get it everywhere. So just be careful when you're using your colours. And now, as with any mixed media layout, some background stamping really does help to add some dimension. And I'm looking at the background and I'm thinking, okay, I like where this is going. This is really not me, but the combination of the velvet and the navy is really appealing to me. I love how it's looking. I sort of wanted to break that up a little bit. So you can see I've put some snow white paste on there. Realistically, it probably should have been a different color paste, but I didn't want to add too much to the background and make it too busy, but I also wanted something that sort of stood out against that busy background. Not quite sure if that makes any sense, but you kind of get the idea where I was going. Final stages of the layout really coming together now are simply to add some florals. I've sort of gone with the clock theme just as a continuation of the stamp that I chose to use in the background, that great clock stamp, and that also came from that original background paper. So the Prima paper had some clocks in it as well, so I've sort of used that as how I've chosen my stamp. Mostly I've gone ahead and stuck all of this down off camera because nobody wants to sit and watch me stick stuff down. You get the idea of the layout. I have titled the page Learn, and that was purely just because that's the first word that sort of pops out in that little circular element on the cluster. So I'm showing you a couple of close-ups now, and you'll see the full layout here again shortly. I really hope you enjoyed that video from me, of course, using Color Blast products. Thanks so much for visiting, and don't forget to subscribe.